One of the first ruthless lessons that makes a person dangerously smart is learning to stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. This sounds simple on the surface, but psychologically, it is one of the hardest shifts a person can make. Most people are conditioned to believe that if they can just say it better, clarify one more time, or offer enough evidence, they will finally be understood. But that belief often keeps intelligent people trapped in exhausting cycles with the wrong individuals. There is a major difference between someone who lacks information and someone who rejects truth because truth threatens their position. The first person can be reasoned with. The second person uses confusion as a strategy. They ask questions not to learn, but to keep you defending yourself. They twist words not because they are confused, but because your clarity removes their leverage. Once you understand this distinction, your life changes. Many manipulative people survive through forcing others into constant explanation. If you are always defending your intentions, clarifying your tone, or proving your worth, then your energy belongs to them. They set the frame, and you are reacting inside it. That is not communication. That is control disguised as conversation. Smart people recognize that endless explanation is often an unconscious bid for approval. It comes from the fear of being disliked, misjudged, or abandoned. This is where attachment psychology becomes important. People with anxious attachment patterns often over-explain because they believe relationships are maintained through reassurance and emotional labor. They think, if I can make them understand me, then I can keep connection. But connection built on self-betrayal is never stable. The emotionally intelligent person learns that being misunderstood is sometimes the price of self-respect. You do not need universal agreement to be valid. You do not need everyone to approve of your motives. Some people benefit from seeing you as the villain because it excuses their own behavior. Others need you confused because your clarity threatens the role they assign to you. This is why silence can be a higher form of intelligence than argument. Silence is not weakness. Silence is selective engagement. It is the refusal to perform for those who have already chosen their narrative. When someone is committed to distortion, more words become more material to manipulate. In those moments, the strongest response is often brevity, a simple sentence, a boundary, then distance. This does not mean becoming cold or arrogant. It means becoming precise. It means saving explanation for those capable of honesty. There are people in life who deserve your depth, your context, your effort, but not everyone earns access to your inner world. Wisdom is knowing the difference. There is also a philosophical maturity in accepting that perception is not fully controllable. You can live with integrity and still be misread. You can act with kindness and still be judged. Trying to manage every opinion is a form of slavery. Freedom begins when you understand that your responsibility is to your character, not to every interpretation of it. Watch confident people closely. They do not rush to correct every rumor, answer every accusation, or justify every decision. They know something insecure people forget. Truth does not become false because it is questioned, and lies do not become true because they are repeated. When you stop over-explaining, you reclaim attention, energy, and authority. You stop auditioning for acceptance. You become less readable to manipulators and more loyal to yourself. That is when people often say you have changed. They are correct. You changed from accessible to protected, from reactive to deliberate, from desperate to grounded, and that is the lesson. Not everyone deserves an explanation, especially those who profit from your confusion. The second ruthless lesson that makes a person dangerously smart is learning emotional detachment without losing compassion. Many people misunderstand detachment. They imagine it means becoming cold, distant, indifferent, or emotionally numb. But true detachment is none of those things. It is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel deeply without being ruled by what you feel. Most human suffering does not come only from events themselves. It comes from fusion with events. Someone rejects us, and we become rejection. Someone criticizes us, and we become shame. Someone withdraws, and we become panic. We absorb external moments into identity. This is where emotional immaturity keeps people trapped. They do not experience emotions as passing states, they experience them as definitions of self. Detachment begins when we create space between stimulus and response. Something happens, and instead of instantly reacting, we observe. We notice the tightening in the chest, The anger rising, the urge to defend, the fear of abandonment, the impulse to control. In that pause, intelligence is born. Because when there is no pause, there is only programming. Much of that programming is old. It often begins in childhood. If love was inconsistent, criticism harsh, or safety uncertain, the nervous system learns to scan constantly for threat. Then later in adult relationships, a delayed text message can feel like betrayal, disagreement can feel like danger, and distance can feel like loss. The present moment gets filtered through unresolved history. We think we are reacting to today, but often we are reacting to yesterday. This is why emotional detachment is not about suppressing emotion. Suppression drives pain deeper into the body and mind. Detachment is about witnessing emotion with honesty. I feel anger right now. I feel fear right now. I feel the urge to chase, prove, punish, or withdraw. Naming an emotion without becoming it changes the relationship to it. You stop drowning in the wave and start studying the tide. Compassion must remain part of this process. Without compassion, detachment becomes armor. An armor may protect you from pain, but it also blocks connection. The goal is not to become untouchable. The goal is to become stable. Stable enough to hear criticism without collapse. Stable enough to face rejection without self-hatred. Stable enough to witness another person's chaos without joining it. There is a profound difference between empathy and enmeshment. Empathy says, I understand your pain. Enmeshment says, your pain now controls my state. Many caring people confuse the two. They take responsibility for moods that are not theirs, solve problems no one asked them to solve, and carry emotional burdens that do not belong to them. Then they call it love. Often it is fear that if they do not manage everyone else, they will lose connection. Dangerously smart people learn boundaries at the emotional level. They can care without rescuing. They can listen without absorbing. They can love without abandoning themselves. This is rare strength, because many people can react. Few can remain present. There is also a philosophical freedom in detachment. You begin to see that much of life is outside your control. Other people's opinions, choices, moods, projections, and timing. When you stop trying to govern what was never yours to govern, energy returns. You invest it where it matters, your conduct, your integrity, your habits, your truth. And paradoxically, detached people often love better. They do not cling, manipulate, or demand that others regulate their inner world. They offer presence rather than possession. They bring steadiness rather than drama. They know love is not control, and closeness is not dependency. When someone insults you, disappoints you, ignores you, or misunderstands you, the old self asks, what does this say about me? The wiser self asks, what does my response say about me? That is the shift. Not becoming emotionless, but becoming ungovernable by emotion. Not hardening the heart, but strengthening the center. Feel everything. Obey nothing. The third ruthless lesson that makes a person dangerously smart is learning to observe patterns, not promises. This sounds almost obvious, yet many intelligent people repeatedly suffer because they continue to believe words over evidence. They listen to intentions while ignoring behavior. They trust potential while dismissing reality. And in doing so, they place hope where discernment should have been. Human beings are deeply vulnerable to language. Words can soothe us, inspire us, seduce us, and disarm us. A promise activates possibility. It gives the nervous system relief. Things will change. That didn't mean it. That next time will be different. You matter to me. These phrases can temporarily reduce pain, especially for someone who longs for security or fears loss. But temporary relief is not truth. It is only relief. Patterns are truth extended through time. Anyone can behave well for a day, apologize in a convincing tone, or make declarations in emotional moments. But patterns reveal what a person returns to when the performance ends. Patterns show how someone behaves when tired, challenged, disappointed, jealous, bored, or no longer trying to impress. Character is not found in isolated moments. It is found in repetition. Many people ignore patterns because doing so protects. Attachment. If I admit the pattern, I may need to set a boundary. If I admit the pattern, I may need to grieve the relationship I hoped for. If I admit the pattern, I may have to face my own loneliness. So the mind bargains. It highlights exceptions and minimizes consistency. It says, yes, but they were kind yesterday. Yes, but they had a hard childhood. Yes, but they said they'll change. Compassion matters. Context matters. Pain explains behavior, but it does not erase impact. Someone may have wounds, trauma, or fear, and those realities deserve understanding. But understanding is not the same as surrendering discernment. You can empathize with someone's history and still recognize that their unresolved pain is harming you in the present. This principle applies far beyond relationships. Observe patterns in your own life. Do you repeatedly abandon goals when discomfort begins? Do you keep choosing familiar chaos because calm feels unfamiliar? Do you mistake intensity for connection, urgency for importance, attention for love? The patterns we tolerate externally often mirror the patterns we have not healed internally. Dangerously smart people become students of repetition. They listen carefully, but they watch more carefully. They notice whether apologies are followed by change. They notice whether respect disappears when boundaries appear. They notice whether generosity only exists when there is something to gain. They notice whether someone supports growth in theory but resents it in practice. This is not cynicism. Cynicism assumes the worst. Wisdom observes what is. There's a great difference. Cynical people close their hearts because they expect betrayal. Wise people keep their hearts open, but their eyes open too. They do not punish new people for old wounds, yet they do not ignore evidence to preserve fantasy. There is also humility in trusting patterns. It means accepting that we are not above deception, charm, or self-deception. Many people think intelligence protects them from manipulation. Often it does not. In fact, intelligence can become a liability when it is used to rationalize red flags. A clever mind can explain away almost anything. But reality remains unchanged. When you learn to trust patterns, you stop wasting years waiting for a version of someone that appears only in words. You stop negotiating with repeated disrespect. You stop calling inconsistency confusion when it is consistency in disguise. And you become more honest with yourself. Because the most painful pattern to confront is often not theirs, that is ours. The pattern of hoping against evidence. The pattern of staying where we shrink. The pattern of calling intuition over thinking when it is trying to protect us. Watch what repeats. That is where truth lives. Promises speak once. Patterns keep talking. The fourth ruthless lesson that makes a person dangerously smart is learning to become comfortable being misunderstood while you grow. This may be one of the most difficult forms of maturity because it asks you to release something many people have spent their whole lives chasing. Approval. Not love, not respect, but approval, the desire to be seen positively by everyone around you. And growth often threatens that desire. When a person begins to change, the people around them do not simply witness new behavior. They experience disruption. Every relationship develops an emotional contract, often unspoken. You play a role, and others adapt to it. Perhaps you were the agreeable one, the rescuer, the available one, the self-doubting one, the one who tolerated poor treatment, the one who never said no. Then something shifts. You begin setting boundaries. You become quieter, clearer, less reactive. You stop explaining, stop chasing, stop shrinking. To you, this feels like healing. To others, it may feel like betrayal. This is why growth is so often mislabeled. Boundaries get called selfishness. Calm gets called distance. Confidence gets called arrogance. Privacy gets called secrecy. Independence gets called coldness. What changed was not necessarily your character. What changed was your accessibility to unhealthy dynamics. Many people become trapped at this stage. They sense their own development, but the discomfort of being misread pulls them backward. They return to old patterns simply to restore familiar approval. They apologize for healthy limits. They dim their clarity to soothe those unsettled by it. In psychological terms, they abandon the emerging self to preserve attachment. This pattern often begins early in life. Children are exquisitely sensitive to connection. If belonging depended on pleasing others, minimizing needs, or performing a certain identity, then authenticity can feel dangerous in adulthood. To be misunderstood may unconsciously register as rejection, and rejection may feel like a survival threat. So the adult continues managing perception long after the original conditions have passed. Healing requires recognizing this mechanism. The discomfort you feel when others misjudge you is often older than the moment itself. It may be the nervous system remembering a time when acceptance felt necessary for safety. Once you see that, you gain choice. You can feel the discomfort without obeying it. There is also a philosophical truth here. No person has full control over how they are perceived. People interpret you through their wounds, needs, fears, expectations, and level of consciousness. One person will call you strong because you said no. Another will call you difficult for the same act. One person will admire your silence. Another will resent it. If identity depends on public consensus, stability is impossible. Dangerously smart people stop trying to be universally understood. They become committed instead to being internally coherent. Their values align with their actions. Their words align with their boundaries. Their outer life reflects inner truth more than social pressure. This creates a quiet power, not the power of domination, but of congruence. This does not mean becoming careless about impact. It is wise to listen, reflect, and repair when we genuinely harm others. Growth is not stubbornness, but there is a difference between accountability and surrendering yourself to every accusation. Some criticism is information. Some criticism is resistance to your evolution. You will notice something interesting as you mature. The people who benefited from the old version of you often complain the loudest about the new one. Those who truly care may need time to adjust, but they eventually respect the change. Those invested in your weakness will try to pathologize your strength, so the task is not to convince everyone. The task is to remain rooted while perception shifts around you. To let others have incomplete stories about you, if that is the price of honesty. To allow temporary misunderstanding rather than permanent self-betrayal. There is freedom in this. Once you no longer need to be perfectly understood, you become available for real growth. You stop performing identity and start inhabiting it. Some people will misunderstand your growth because they only loved your limitations. Grow anyway.